The Vourdalak is a 2023 French horror film directed by Adrien Beau. The Vourdalak follows a Marquis
Jacques-Antoine Saturnin d'Urfé
as he travels back to France. Along the way, he's robbed, and he's directed to seek out aid from the family of Gorcha.
Vous rencontrerez la demeure du vieux Gorcha.
When arriving at Gorcha's home, he's informed that the elder is not currently there. Instead, Gregor, who's the oldest son of the house, is willing to offer aid on behalf of his father. It's revealed by Gorcha's daughter and younger son, Setka and Peter, that Gorcha went off to fight the Turks, who had been pillaging the local villages in the area. Gorcha had warned them that if he is to return after 6 days, to consider him dead, not to let him into the home, and that he would be a Vourdalak, a vampire of their region, who comes back specifically to consume its family and friends. Yegor, the oldest son, doesn't believe in Vourdalaks and is convinced that they're being superstitious, and so when 6 days comes and goes, and Gorcha does return briefly after, he takes their father back into the home. This proves to be the downfall of the film, with Gorcha obviously taking on the quintessential role of the Vourdalak. The remainder of the film follows the Marquis as he watches the family become corrupted from the inside via Gorcha, who consumes first the youngest of them, Yegor, and Anja's son Vlad, who subsequently consumes his mother Anja, and so on as the family steadily dwindles. I don't want to go too in depth with the details and nuances of the story because I do think that this movie is worth watching, and quite a few twists and turns felt dependent on having never seen the movie before. I will say Anja gets probably my favorite scene in the whole movie between her and Vlad after her son has become sick from the Vourdalak.
Croyez-vous que la mort et tous les démons de l'enfer puissent une seconde seulement prévenir une mère d'aller embrasser l'enfant qu'on lui a arraché?
This movie made waves, at least on my social media, for the special effects in it, specifically that of Gorcha, the Vourdalak himself, who is a marionette, which creates a really cool visual element to the movie. And while the puppet doesn't necessarily look 100% convincing 100% of the time, I do think it is a cool visual element. I am a fan of puppets in general, so it may just be a biased take, but I think it adds a really cool, unique visual element to the movie and harkens back to the overall more fantastical vibe. The whole film has almost a dreamy or fairy tale look to it, which I think comes a lot from the classical stylings, but also the actual film used. There's also a lot of symbolism in the film, both from the monster perspective. Vampires oftentimes traditionally represent disease, specifically things like tuberculosis or the plague. You get that with movies like the 1922 Nosferatu, as well as newer takes on vampires, and this is no exception. The first inclinations of the Vourdalak are treated very much like a disease, before it takes on a much more fantastical element towards the end of the film. The creatures themselves are also described to suck on the blood from their burial shrouds, which creates a sickening auditory element, which is cool. That grosses me out, but there's a lot of other things going on in the Vourdalak film, although again I don't want to spoil it too much. So the movie definitely has a lot to say on the makeup of family dynamics, especially in this traditional or historical setting, and the roles of authority that are played in the hierarchical systems implemented within the household. There's a lot of rules and expectations that they have kind of confined themselves into in order to sustain the dynamic as it's presented at the beginning of the film. This movie's saying a lot. I'm sure someone smarter than me and more eloquent than me could say a lot more about it. Unfortunately, you clicked on this video, so I think I'm really making this video just to chat about this film. It reminds me a lot, as I mentioned earlier, of Nosferatu and more monstrous takes on vampires, which at least to me is interesting. I think they've kind of fallen out of fashion, so it's good to see them making a resurgence again. I love monsters, especially when they get to be gross and scary, and this is definitely a more folkloric or fairy tale Fairytale take on the vampire, which I think is super cool and something that I would love to see more of. I don't want to over-explain this movie because I really think it is worth knowing as little as you can before you go into it. It's got moments that are silly and moments that are serious, but it does a nice job mixing the two together. For every element that I'm feeling a little tense about or finding to be kind of a low tonal point, there was also the Marquis dancing in the woods with Sedka and looking like an absolute fool, which made it fun.
C'est ridicule.
They also made quite a few other jokes that I thought were funny. I don't speak French, and this movie doesn't have any English dubs, but I don't mind subtitles, so regardless, I do think that more or less is all I have to say about the Vourdalak. I did learn when making this video that it's based on a 1839 novella called The Family of the Vourdalak by Alexei Tolstoy. There's a few different recordings on YouTube of people reading that story. I'll post a link to the one that I listened to prior to making this video, but yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks for checking out this video, and I think this is the first time I'm talking about a movie with real people in it, which is really interesting, to me anyway. Something to mark off my bucket list. But yeah, have you heard of the Vourdalak? Let me know. I'd love to find other people that have watched it and have their own ideas and takes on it. But yeah, have a good night, YouTube.